Hey guys, welcome back to the Football Diary podcast, and it's a European Finals special today. Well, I say special, I mean the Europa League Final was nothing special about it at all, so we'll scoot over that one. But the Champions League Final was a bit of a cracker between Man City, and Chelsea are actually European champions, which is big news. I mean, everybody had City down, I think, as favourites, didn't they, mostly? So yeah, loads to digest there. And I think as a neutral, well, I say neutral, as a Man United fan, I was quite happy to see Chelsea win. I think that was the same for most neutrals, really, because I just think they on balance have got more of an incentive to win the Champions League at the minute, because I mean they've had such a rough, weird, topsy-turvy season. So we'll be dissecting how Chelsea have done, what that means for them, dissecting what it means for Man City going forward, and whether they'll bounce back. And probably start with the missing guy in the team from a while, John. You can see there in the corner. How you doing, mate? Good to see you. Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and obviously got John with Myles and Dave as well. So the full team, and it feels like we're back in business, guys. It's good to see you all. John, what did you make of the Champions League final then? Were Chelsea worthy winners in the end? Because it's a topsy-turvy first half of the game, but I actually thought Chelsea ran away with it after that. As soon as they got the goal, they pretty much dominated it. I couldn't see City getting back in it. Is that the way you saw it as well?
Yes, I thought that it was a bit of an odd one. If you watch the highlights, it actually looks like a really even game, but watching it live, it didn't feel like that at all. I watched about 8 minutes worth of highlights the following day, and it looked a little bit more exciting than it was. Like Chelsea with a couple of massive defensive tackles, a couple of big chances as well when Pulisic dinked it over Ederson and it went just wide of the post. Then Man City's chances, they had Foden with a couple. There was one, I can't remember who it was, could have squared it and went for a shot instead. So it was nice to see an English team win it. But in all honesty, in my opinion, that's where it ends for me. Both teams have become massive because of foreign investment and essentially oil money. So it's one of those things where I've become a bit more detached with teams like that. My friend my really good friend Simon, I've known him since I was a kid. He supports Chelsea and I'm kind of happy for him and Chelsea fans that I know. But past that, I think it's, we was whinging about the European Super League and the money and all that kind of thing. And I think Chelsea and City have become big because of that before financial fair play, and then got a slightly unfair advantage on a lot of teams through that. So, yeah, I mean, talking a bit more about the emotional side of it and the money behind the scenes, good to see Chelsea win. It would have been equally nice for City because it would have been a first one for them. But past that, yeah, I mean, that's kind of really everything. The game was good. It was entertaining for a neutral, and I think that's all people really want. A couple more goals would have been nice, obviously, but yeah, it was still a good game.
Yeah, I think the effect of Chelsea winning has sent sort of shockwaves around the Premier League, especially because Man City were so dominant in the league. But you wouldn't have noticed that on the pitch. I think man to man, Chelsea did so well in containing City, not just containing them. They took the game to them, didn't they, Myles? I mean, for me, their counter-attacking play was superb, and I think their wing-backs in particular deserve plenty of praise.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say that going into the game, everyone would have had Man City as favourites. But as soon as those lineups came out, you started to wonder again. The selection from City was a really odd choice. They were overrunning midfield, and that was really predictable. You've seen the form of Kante in the Champions League in particular of late, and he's just been fantastic at bursting forward with the ball, finding little pockets of space, picking up the ball where he needs to. So to not have that kind of defensive screen of either Fernandinho or Rodri was a very odd choice in a final in particular, when it is going to be so closely cut. And then again, to not have a focal point in attack as well. Pep has this tendency, as we've seen for a few years now, of when it really gets serious in Europe, he might make the wrong decision and try and tinker too much. And it looked like he'd kind of got over that this year. But Chelsea just exploited it so well. For a game that was only 1-0, and I think City only had 2 shots on target, it was a really entertaining 1-0. But Chelsea could have been out of sight in the first half. Werner could have had a hat-trick. The first chance where Havertz squares the ball across to him and he just rolls his foot over it was golden. And then there's one there where the ball gets cut back to him and it's just slightly under his body and he manages to just toe poke it towards Ederson. But the signs were there that they were going to be able to hit them on the break. And for the goal, Mason Mount's ball is unbelievable. But you are left wondering where the City defence was. Havertz is bang in the middle of the pitch, and Zinchenko is the only one who's covering. And even he, using the word covering is favourable, really. I don't know what it was he was doing. But where was City's centre-backs? Diaz and Stones have both been pulled away to that wing, because Werner's movement is really sharp, and they both kind of followed him. So it left so much space for Havertz, and they exploited it well, and then just defended with everything they had. Someone like Azpilicueta can be so proud of that performance, because he is getting to the latter stages of his career. There's a lot of talk of whether he might have had to move out of the side to let someone like Reece James come through. And someone like Christensen as well, who came on halfway through the game. They had outstanding performances. Yeah. It didn't really feel like a typical backs against the wall defensive performance in that sense, because they looked really comfortable doing it. It wasn't like they were having to play out of their skin. They just looked like they were ready to deal with whatever Man City threw at them. And you're right when you throw praise to the fullbacks. They were fantastic. Reece James and Ben Chilwell were two of Chelsea's best players. Kyle Walker was probably Man City's best player too. So that was encouraging for us as England fans. But no, Chelsea really deserved the win. I thought they were the better side on the night. I think Tuchel got his tactics completely right, and they all played like they wanted to win it. City just looked like they didn't have any ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talk about Chelsea missing a centre forward, and Timo Werner's got the right ideas, I think, but his execution in the final third is just not that great. But you said City lacked sort of an attacking threat as well, and they had, I think, Sterling and Mahrez as false nines, almost two false nines, which didn't work. They kept drifting out wide. Dave, did you see any threat of goal coming from Man City from your perspective? Because I think without an actual recognised striker, they didn't look like putting any chances away at all, did they?
I think they looked well in it in the first half. For the Chelsea goal, it was a little bit sort of it was going one way and then the other, but it did look like Chelsea just always looked the more threatening. Obviously, Myles just mentioned that Werner missed two golden opportunities, and if they'd not gone on to win that final, I think those chances would have been looked upon. And obviously, that's somewhere they can improve, and they do need a striker who's clinical. You think you score those two goals and you're 2-0 up, and it's making it even easy for you. But I think it's one of the first times I've watched a City game this season. In the second half, I just couldn't see them scoring. Like you looked at it, and the way they were playing it, it was so easy to play against, because they were just the complete opposite of how they normally are. They were slow to everything. Chelsea were stronger in the tackle, first to every ball, every 50-50 they were winning. Just touched up on it then, the fullbacks. I think Reece James in particular, after Kante was my man of the match, I thought it was absolutely unbelievable. He set the marker in that game, the pace as well, how he came out. Absolutely dominated that right flank. And Sterling just didn't have a look in. I know reports come out today, and obviously a few players from Man City as well. Apparently they're not happy and how much playtime they get in. The likes of Sterling, Laporte, and Jesus, they look like they're going to have a bit of a refresher, and I think they need it, to be honest. Looking on the back of that performance, when Man City are on such a roll coming towards the end of the season, and you kind of that performance gets pulled out the bag, it was a little bit out of nowhere, really, and it's concerning for City. Obviously, we're not bothered as Man United fans, especially after United's performance. But it's all credit to Chelsea, really, and they put in performance when it was needed.
Yeah, I think with City's performance as well, I think the most surprising thing was that they didn't have anybody really to dominate play in midfield, and that's normally sort of their hallmark. They just flood the midfield with actual midfielders and sacrifice forwards for that. So I think that's where N'Golo Kante really came into his own, didn't he? And you talk about him being man of the match. Fully agree. For me, he was like the main component of this Chelsea team to sort of thwart any sort of Chelsea possession, because I think the possession was actually fairly even between the two teams, wasn't it? But tactically, where do you think Thomas Tuchel got it right, John? I'll go back to you. What was your take on sort of the tactical battle between the two managers, and how do you think they sort of managed it? Did Pep overthink it like many said he would, or was it just a Tuchel masterclass in midfield?
Yeah, one thing that's not been mentioned is I think there was Chelsea's third win in a row against City. So it seems that whether he's got his number or not, and he's trying to do something different to compensate for that, maybe he was already in his head a little bit. But taking that away, I think Myles mentioned it quite early on, Fernandinho and Rodri, in reality, you could have looked at the team and played both of them and set up to counter a little bit more, not start Sterling. Don't know who else you'd really take off, to be honest, but not do this, double false nine nonsense. It just didn't work. They were so exposed in the middle of the park. And in fairness, he didn't change it and had an opportunity to do so. 40 minutes in, if you're conceding a few pretty big chances, Silva goes off injured, maybe he looks at that and thinks, you know what, they've made a change, I'll just do a like for like. No one wants to be taken off before half time, especially in the final. But, you got to cut your losses sometimes, and he could have definitely justified the decision. Maybe they then don't score that goal, Mount doesn't have the space for a through ball, and it's a completely different game.
Yeah, it was a strange battle thing. I don't know about you guys, but I lost a couple of you then, weirdly, on the screen. Myles, go back to you. I mean, in terms of a tactical battle, how did you see it? Did you think it was a bit of a disappointment to see Man City not quite control the game in midfield as much as you thought? Or do you think it was just a case of Chelsea's players being more up for it on the day? I mean, how would you see it? What was your interpretation of the whole game?
As a neutral, it definitely wasn't disappointing because it allowed for a more open game. I think if you were a Man City fan, you'd have been crying out for Rodri or Fernandinho. Maybe not both, but at least one of them. But for us watching the game, just looking for the spectacle, it was great because it did enable a very open game. But if you want to open a game up like that, you have to have some way of exploiting that openness. And City didn't do that. Mahrez is a fantastic player, but he looked really isolated at times. And Sterling, he seems so off the pace. I couldn't work out whether Sterling had a bad game or Reece James was just that brilliant. I felt Reece James was man of the match personally. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. He covered every single run. I think about that moment when Ederson plays that ball over the top. And Sterling's touch, I actually think is quite good to bring it back inside. The recovery from James is fantastic. So I think tactically, I don't think Tuchel would have expected such an easy ride, if I'm honest. Because if you said what do you not want to see in a Man City team, you don't want to see them controlling that midfield, and you don't want to see them with someone lethal like Aguero up front. And Guardiola gave him that. He gave him a forward who's off form in Sterling, and he gave him Bernardo Silva as a centre mid. And I like Bernardo Silva, but that is not his best position at all. Gunnar picked up a really early yellow as well, which meant it was a lot harder for him to kind of get stuck in the middle when he needed to. Obviously, it's unfortunate for De Bruyne to go off when he did because he could create something out of nothing at any moment in a game. But again, he needs someone to feed the ball to, and he just didn't set up for that. Even Foden was a bit too deep at times, and he could go on these marauding runs and get forward. But when he got there was nothing there for him. I think it was more a case of Guardiola getting his tactics wrong than Tuchel getting them right in many ways. But also partly, the Chelsea players just seemed really committed to the cause, didn't they? Which is interesting because you would have thought it being City's first final and this being kind of the monkey that's been on their back for a few years now about them underperforming in Europe, I thought they'd be really up for it. But Chelsea seemed like much more likely from the get-go, even though the game was quite open at first and they were quite even in terms of getting the ball into attacking positions. Chelsea were the only ones making chances. City had the ball, moved it forward well, but did nothing with it. Whereas we can all list 3 or 4 chances that Chelsea missed. I couldn't tell you one City missed in that game.
Yeah,
I think it was just flat. And I think that they will all watch that back and regret a lot of the decisions they made, particularly Guardiola.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's one of those things where I feel like it's almost inevitable that they will come back stronger and almost buy sort of better players in the positions that they need. If not next season, then probably the season after, and win the thing. So I think we're just delaying the inevitable of Man City becoming European champions eventually. A bit like when Liverpool won the league last year. It felt like they were due a league win at some point and they were building up to it. I think City will be the same. And it's interesting what Dave says about some of the players being unhappy with the lack of game time as well. That was always going to be on the agenda when you've got so many internationals sitting on a bench like they have. So how they sort of bounce back from this, how they potentially, I say rebuild, I don't think they need a rebuild necessarily, but they're missing some key additions in some key positions, aren't they? Just to kind of take them to that next level. A centre forward.
So bad.
Yeah, well, that's the next question. In terms of a centre forward, who do they go for, John? Is it kind of go for Haaland, we're hearing a lot, as their next solution? Harry Kane potentially, but obviously his age is against him. So who do they go for next to kind of take them to the final again and replace the void that Aguero leaves?
Well, you've mentioned the 2 big boys that are being earmarks at the minute by a lot of teams that can afford them. Harry Kane, in fairness, as long as he doesn't keep getting niggly little injuries, which you're not going to know until you sign him, he's still got 4 or 5 years easy. In his prime is 27? So it'd only be in his early 30s in 5 years' time, which still never really had a lot of pace, in fairness. Just had a very good touch and a superb striker of the ball. I mean, one of the best we've seen ever. Haaland, flip side of that, a bit like a Foden, electric, scoring goals. And by that, I mean he's under talent. And he's someone that, again, if he does stay injury-free in his career, he could be an absolute world-beater, like a superstar. So it depends if I want someone that's proven consistently for a number of years, or someone that has done the business for a couple of years now and looks like they could be, the next big thing. But randomly, those names, Haaland's been linked with Chelsea today, where Abramovich and Lukaku randomly, again, go back. So there's definitely money there because they've won the Champions League. I think that he's happier to invest in another, one marquee signing again. But you look at the money they spent on players last few years, it's disgusting, really. Like Havertz, nearly 100 million, Werner, 70 odd million or whatever it was. And that's just to mention 2 people. There's been another 3 or 4 additions. Pulisic was not a bad amount of money, but they signed him and left him at Dortmund for 6 months, didn't they? And he's joined at the end of the season. He was at about, 45, 50 million? That's 250 million and not 3 players pretty much. So winning the Champions League, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up beating someone to the punch a little bit and sign one of the big boys.
Yeah, I think with the kudos that they get from winning the Champions League, it almost kind of puts them ahead of the queue for people like Haaland, doesn't it? My next question for Dave really is to sort of talk about Chelsea and where they go from this. Is this a starting point for them becoming massive again, becoming competitive at this level? Because I'm surprised that they have won the European Cup, because at the start of the season, I know Lampard was in charge, you wouldn't have had them down as European Cup ready, would you? And the way Thomas Tuchel's taken them and accelerated them to that position, it, for me, is a stunning management feat for him. And I think it's probably a feat that he will never top in his managerial career. It's been a really sort of sharp rise for them from the Lampard days, hasn't it, to winning the competition. But where next, Dave? Where next? Where do they go? Is this the pinnacle already?
I think what you've obviously got to say is a lot of things fall into place for Chelsea as well in the Champions League. They've obviously faced a couple of under-par teams, one in Real Madrid, which is unrecognisable from previous year. They're in a massive decline. But yeah, I mean, you've got to give credit to them. You've got to beat what's in front of you, and they've done that. But I feel as though they're still missing something in there as well as a striker. They've struggled to break teams down this season. I don't know whether that's part of Tuchel's system that they've struggled with, but I think they do need probably something in the wide areas, potentially something else in the attacking midfield areas. They have struggled to break down, and it's not just down to missing chances. They've not created enough chances in games to win games.
They can't need to invest in another attacking midfielder though if they've got Havertz in there, who will probably end up being a number 10 if they do bring in another number 9. They've still got Hakim Ziyech as well. Matt can play further forward. I do wonder whether actually, if Werner had been more clinical, any of us would even think of Chelsea not creating chances, because really his movement is brilliant. A lot of the time, his ideas for it anyway. His execution's a bit poor because he ends up offside so often. But actually, he reminds me a lot of Cavani in terms of the runs he makes. He knows where to put himself. He knows how to draw defenders away. He just can't finish it.
Yeah, his movement is brilliant, but he gets himself offside about 5-6 times a game. But also, there's talk of Lukaku coming out, who seems like he's the favorite to come back to Chelsea. I quite like I think Werner's link-up play is quite good. I think it's quite underrated, but I don't think Lukaku's got the same level of link-up play. It's just a matter of whether Chelsea's attacking players can combine with Lukaku. It's something that United struggled a little bit with
He's developed a lot though, because he's been working with another striker a lot as well in Lautaro Martinez. So I think he has developed his game a lot in that area. But also he does have that kind of ruthlessness of, do you know what? I don't need to link it up right now. I'm going to slam this into the top corner.
It seems as though Haaland's probably going to stay put this season. From reports are saying that he's going to get another year out of Dortmund, and then apparently he's available 65 million next year in the release clause. So it's whoever's lucky enough to get in next year. But it seems like Lukaku's probably the main man. Do I think? Yeah, of course they weren't favourites for the Champions League, but we all said if there's any team that City wouldn't probably like to play, it's a team that's got strong structure, we're brilliant in defence, know how to win, and know what they need to do to win games. So I don't know I think they'll be up there. I can see them maybe top 4 again, top 3, but I don't think don't think they'll win the league. In what you're saying, Myles, about Ziyech, I think he's been disappointing this season.
Yeah, he has.
He's been brilliant, to be honest. And there's been reports of them being interested in Sancho. I know you're talking about depth, and they have a good deal of depth. But you've got to think, what is that better than what you've already got in your starting 11? And he is. Sancho is better than anything they've got in there from the wing they've got in there.
You'd be fuming if you're Christian Pulisic and you moved away from Dortmund so you weren't under Sancho and then it happened again.
Yeah, definitely.
But all of these strikers that we talk about and these big moves that might line up, even though City have won the league, even with Guardiola, you do think Chelsea would be a better prospect. If I was at number 9 right now, I'd look at Man City and think, well, Pep quite often decides he's not going to play a striker in the big games. They've had Sergio Aguero sat on the bench, who's one of the most clinical finishers we've ever seen in the English game. He's had Jesus come in, who was talked about as the up-and-coming big prospect, a bit like Haaland, obviously not quite on the same level as Haaland because he hadn't done it in Europe. And has he really got to the level that you would have wanted him to under Guardiola? No, definitely not.
Well, how must he be feeling now, to be fair? Gabriel Jesus must be feeling like he's not part of the first team plans at all. Aguero's out the door, the only person who was standing in his way, and yet he's still not starting a Champions League final. So,
but for whoever the striker is, that's not the only person that was in their way. The person in the way was Guardiola decided, I don't need a striker. And that's not uncommon for him to do. So if I was Kane, would I really have faith in the fact that I was going to be able to excel my game under Guardiola? Maybe more so with him because of the way he plays, but I doubt it. I definitely wouldn't if I was Haaland, because I just would think he ain't going to play me half the time. And that's not the point of it. You want to play in the big games. I don't think Man City are a very attractive prospect to a number 9 right now.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, they're playing without a striker, but I was wondering whether they are playing that false 9 because Pep's not happy with the way Gabriel Jesus is developing and because of the decline of Aguero. And he just hasn't had a world-class finisher that he considers worthy of a place at the head of his attack. Maybe that's just it. It's a trust issue. If he had an informed Erling Haaland there, who, let's face it, is almost unplayable when he's on form because of his physicality, I think he would actually see more goals going in with that situation than the way they were trying to play around Chelsea. Well, they weren't even trying to play around Chelsea, were they? With no striker at all. Because it doesn't matter how much you dominate midfield. If you get that ball in the final third and it's not a world-class finisher there, the ball's not going in the back of the net. They just didn't take any chances.
Chelsea played a false 9 in that game as well, really, with Havertz, but just did it way more effectively because he managed to link the play a lot better from deep. The 2 wider forwards managed to get themselves into better attacking positions. Guardiola, I actually felt like it wasn't Sterling and Mahrez as the false 9s. I thought they were the wide men. And I thought he actually was trying to play both Foden and De Bruyne as number 10s and didn't really have it. Didn't have a false 9. He had 2 10s and fingers and nothing for them to feed. It was bizarre.
Well, I think they started off trying to play Mahrez and Sterling central, but their natural instinct is to drift that wide and receive the ball and try and find somebody in the middle, as opposed to waiting for the ball patiently to arrive to them and finish their chance. And I think that's what they needed. Weirdly, they needed almost a 4-4-2 style, a couple of actual goal scorers ready to finish, a Cavani or, somebody who finds space. Aguero, yeah.
He's on the bench. It's his last game ever for the club, and he is the best finisher they've ever had, and he can't play him. For me, it's obvious. You take Sterling out the side, put Foden on the left, put Aguero up front for him, and you took Bernardo Silva out and put on Rodri or Fernandinho. They win that game then. comfortably. They win that game because they've got something to exploit them with. We've seen how good Man City are. They can pull teams apart. And yes, Chelsea have had a couple of good wins against them, but wasn't City's strongest sides in those games either. They were kind of resting players and not really going full go for them. They would have won that game if they'd been better organised. And again, the lack of a focal point would put me off being that focal point ever. If you can't trust Aguero, why are you going to trust me? That would be my idea if I was number 9 right now.
Fair point. I think with Chelsea, I do think like they are still riding like this managerial bounce that you get from a new manager. And although it's one of the best tacticians in the world with Thomas Tuchel, I do feel like they're going to run out of steam eventually and it's going to catch up with them. This is a peak for them. And I think they'll start next season with such high expectations that they'll struggle. I really do, because the team is still young. It's still learning. It's still finding what its best 11 is. It's still finding somebody to replace Thiago Silva and Azpilicueta eventually. You know, is Kurt Zouma good enough to fill that void? Probably not. Although they have got Tomori still to come back from AC Milan on loan, haven't they? So there's options there for them. But none of them are Tuchel players, let's not forget. He hasn't signed anyone for the club yet. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to this in the transfer market.
Rudiger feels like he's a Tuchel player, even though I know what you mean, like he didn't bring him in. But he seems like he's settled so well. He commanded that defence. And Christensen was great when he came on. And he's not always had that in his locker. We've seen him get pulled apart. He got sent off against Chelsea, against Man City recently, didn't he? Definitely. Yeah, I think it just shows the fickle nature of football, though, because a couple of weeks ago we were all purring over Man City, going how brilliant they are, and saying, "Oh, Chelsea have had a few dodgy results, haven't they?" And then one game later, we go, "Yeah, Chelsea look like they're going to crack on. Tuchel's the best manager in the world, and Man City look like they need a rebuild." But that's just football, isn't it? It's going to move.
No, I think in a one-off game, I think Chelsea played the game really, really well. They played the game, and City failed to rise to that occasion. I think it was stage fright for them in many ways, but I do think Chelsea will they're at the peak at the minute of what they can do with this team, and I think they do need some players that are more like what Tuchel would play. There are a few there, like you said, like Rudiger is a natural sort of fit for his kind of style, but I do think they're still a few players away from being what Thomas Tuchel would ideally like for his first team. But I mean, let's not take anything away from them. They're European champions, and they deserve to be, because the run he's put together since taking charge is insane. It deserves a lot of praise, so fair play to him. Dave, you got anything you want to add about City as well, or is it all Chelsea for you? There's a lot of things City didn't really do on the night, but I mean, Pep's been accused of overthinking things. Do you think that was the case this time?
Yeah, I mean, there's not been a shortage of errors from Pep over the years. There's been a catalogue of errors. One when I think he was at Bayern Munich and he played Real Madrid. They beat him 4-0 in the first leg, and he played full backs as inverted I
think, Myles, you said this a few weeks ago. He comes out with these crazy decisions in matches, doesn't he?
Leon last season.
Yeah.
Monaco when they bottled it. Tottenham. It's gone on for a number of years now, and you just have to everyone keeps thinking, Pep's, he's obviously an unbelievable manager, but is it a coincidence anymore? I mean, big games? This year, he struggled to beat big teams this season. He's lost all games against Chelsea. He lost to United once. He drew to United.
Yeah.
So,
also,
carry on, Myles.
Would any of us have picked Zinchenko for that game? I wouldn't have. No way.
I don't know what rate Zinchenko. I think he's a bit too hyped, though, isn't he? He's not really a world-class player, but he looks so overhyped. He's like a Joe Hart. The
highlight of Zinchenko's career for me was this season when he lay down behind the wall and Ruben Diaz picked him up by his head and moved him along. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a strange selection, I think, from Pep Guardiola. But if we were going to dissect it even further, which I'm not going to, because I've got another European final reluctantly to pick over in a minute. But if we're going to look into it any deeper, would you say this is going to be reflective of how the two teams will start next season, Dave? Do you think Chelsea can take heart from this and they'll fly, or do you think Man City will suddenly take a knock from this from a confidence point of view and players will start becoming disgruntled? Or is this just literally a snapshot final of an occasion that happened between two teams and anything? There's a toss of a coin, basically. Anything could happen.
I mean, yeah, it could mentally affect, of course. It's a first European final you've got to, and you've lost. again, and even worse when it's to another English team, and they've lost against Chelsea the last three fixtures. So there's next time they face Chelsea, there's not going to be good memories there for sure. I feel like they need a refreshing in their squad. A few players in there that are aging, and it's quite similar with Chelsea actually as well. They've got a few players in there as that they do need a bit of rejuvenation. I feel bringing through. So it's going to be a big transfer window. I feel for both teams, both Chelsea and Man City, and arguably all the top four.
I think the thing I've been thinking about is with the transfer window, there's got to be player movement out of all of these clubs. There's so many players on big contracts at Chelsea. We know how many players they have out on loan at any one moment. They need to go. They need to move some players on, I think, to start bringing players in. I think as soon as some of those teams start losing a bit of the deadwood in their squads, they can start reinvesting, and we'll see it all kickstart. Chelsea are stacked quite heavily with players, and they have been for years because that's the way they operate. And City need to kind of do the same. They've got some big earners that I think they probably need to get rid of before they buy anyone else. I mean, I'm sure they can sign one massive player off the cuff, but beyond that, I think financial fair play is going to catch up with many teams this season. They can't just go out and spend 400 million in one transfer window, can they? So, I don't know. So it's going to be a weird transfer window. But
you forget,
Myles, I was going to say, Myles, how do you see it moving this season?
You forget some of the players that Chelsea have still got as well. There's talk of Tammy Abraham moving on. Loftus-Cheek has to come back. He's not going to get in that side anytime soon, is he? Barkley will come back as well.
Drinkwater.
Oh, is he not gone now?
He's still a player.
Oh my word! I thought he went in January.
No.
But exactly, there's so many players there that really are kind of useless assets to them, and I think that's mad to say about a couple of them. I think. Well, I'm hoping Villa will snap Tammy Abraham up, definitely. I read us link with Loftus-Cheek as well today, and I'd rather leave that one alone, to be honest. But there is a lot of players available. Whether or not they need to get rid of them to bring anyone in is going to be an interesting one. I think with City, like Dave says, there's a few players that need refreshing there. We know they need to replace Aguero. Fernandinho will probably play a lot less next season. And, of course, they've got Rodri, but whether or not that's their set replacement or not, whether they need more depth there will be another matter. There's talk of Sterling and Mahrez potentially being available, which I think would be mad to get rid of Mahrez. I think he's brilliant. And I think Sterling should stay too, but who knows? You could definitely improve on John Stones still. Although he's had a decent season this season, he's had a decent season relying on Ruben Diaz and still showed that he's got some mistakes in him. So I think they could look to improve there, definitely. It's just, like you say, it's what they can afford to finance. And with those two clubs, you imagine it's quite a lot. Busy window. I'm nervous now, though, because I feel like we're all getting to a point where we're wrapping this up now, and I know what's coming. So I feel like, have we developed a jingle yet for Dave's Man United rant? If not, pending, right?
You know what? You set me up nicely there. Let's not ignore it any longer. Let's dissect the turgid affair that was the Europa League final, because it was awful to watch. I mean, I'm a United fan, so I'm going to say that to an extent. I'm not going to start with you, Dave, because I'm conscious of time. I'm going to start with Myles again. I want you to talk about it from a neutral perspective, how United set up, how Villarreal set up, what Solskjaer got wrong, if we've got time for that, and what United do on the back of this now, because this was their season in a nutshell, really, wasn't it?
I thought I was going to be able to get comfortable then. No, it was dreadful to watch. So, yeah, I'm definitely a neutral in this game. However, I obviously wanted Man United to win as the English side in it, and I do have close affiliation with them through friends and family. So I always root for Man United when I see them play. And I think because I'm not a Man United fan, overestimate what they're capable of and think, yeah, they'll be fine. I was convinced that they were going to walk this final, as was everyone. Every pundit on BT were talking about it like United had won it just by turning up. And they quickly found out it wasn't that simple for them. They got a lot wrong. And I think a lot of what they got wrong fell down to Solskjaer. And the selection in the first place looked like it had a lot of attacking intent. And that's fine. But if it's the wrong kind of attack, that's useless. We knew from watching the semi-final, particularly the second leg, where Villarreal just sat back and allowed Arsenal to come to them and dealt with everything, that they were going to do that again. But it was always obvious that they were going to hold that low line let Man United come to them, and then try and get them on the set piece when they could. It's exactly what happened. And Solskjaer should have figured that out. Playing the quickest wide men he had was not going to be able to exploit anything there. Rashford, for all of his strengths that he might have, isn't the sort of person that is going to unlock a low block like that. He's just not. And he was unfit. It was clear that he was not fit from the second they kicked that game off. He shouldn't have played. It should have been Pogba on that left-hand side. And it became more and more obvious that that was the case. And Solskjaer didn't change it. Like Dave says about, I think John said it about Man City, that after a while you could see what was going wrong, so change it. Solskjaer didn't make a substitution until 10 minutes into extra time. That's mad to me. How often did you have to see Villarreal just sit and soak everything up before you thought, we need to move something here? And even then he got it wrong. I couldn't believe it. When Rashford went down injured and it looked like he was going to have to come off, I thought, you know what? Could be a blessing in disguise here because he's having a dreadful game. And he took Pogba off and left Rashford on. Now, Pogba is a competent penalty taker, so even if you have that in mind, he's still okay for that. But Rashford was being completely ineffective. And it just seemed very obvious to me that really what they needed was to move Pogba out onto that left and maybe put Van der Beek in the middle and have someone else to try and think about finding the passing rather than sprinting through, because they just didn't have the room to do that. Villarreal set up like they were just ready for everything. At one point, it was 1-1 and Emre took a striker off and put on a centre defensive midfield. Yeah. They were happy to not win that game in 90 minutes. They knew that they could just sit, soak everything up. It was going to be easy for them. And United didn't notice that. And I don't know how, because we've seen this how many times with Man United, where if they can counter a team, they'll score. They'll do well. They'll break teams down like that. But if a team just goes, come on then, they struggle massively. And when you've got an unfit Rashford trying to do that, it just fell so far short. I think he got the defence wrong in many ways. I think the goal was such poor marking, the setup. You were missing a leader. And I know Maguire is out and he'd normally do that. But again, I'd always have Tuanzebe over Bailly. I'd always play him above him because he led that under-21 team as well. He is quite vocal for a young man and he probably would have been more organised. And his recovery is a lot better. Bailly's trying to overhead kick clearances again that could have really fallen into trouble at one point. They just looked erratic and they didn't look like they had a plan. They thought their plan was, we're Man United, we'll win this. Yeah. And Emery showed, no, you need to think beyond that. And then for Solskjaer to try and highlight, well, okay, this is what I need to do to win a penalty shootout, but not think maybe it's worth Dean Henderson, who has saved 6 penalties since De Gea last saved 1. Yeah. Bizarre. Why are you bringing on Juan Mata and Tellez with a minute to go to take a penalty, but not thinking about the fact that they'll take 1 penalty? Your goalkeeper's going to face at least 5. That's way more important to me. All right, it might seem like a risky move, but tough. You're trying to win it. Solskjaer, to me, showed why he's not a top-class manager in this game. It's a shame because United managed to get to a final. They finished second in the league. But again, you're left feeling like the season is a disappointment because Solskjaer cannot navigate those big games in cup competitions. He bottles it. He did not get this right at all. It was really disappointing.
Well, I'm an optimist with things like this. I've never been Ole out, but I've always been realistic that he's never been good enough. You know, it's always like a sentimental appointment, wasn't it? However, he, like you said, he should have known what Villarreal were going to bring. The evidence was there in the semi-final in both legs. And they did the same in this game as well. It was a one-off tie where they took it to a lottery of penalties, and that was their intention, I think. And I was genuinely gobsmacked to see United go level and not take it any further and push any harder. But they were just knackered. They were just looking for somebody off the bench to make a difference. And they didn't have anybody on the bench who could really make a difference. Not with the system they had set up. He needed to change things quite dramatically, and he didn't. And the fact that he left it to 10 minutes into extra time to even make a change, and Rashford was still on the pitch, is crazy.
Oh, and also on that, just quickly, the other thing with that is, even if you look at your bench and don't think you have people who will change things, Villarreal made 6 substitutions. So they've got fresher legs everywhere on the pitch. So, all right, you might think it's a like-for-like replacement and it's not someone who's going to completely change the structure of things, but at least they're going to have the energy that someone like Rashford or Greenwood weren't going to have for a while. That seemed obvious to me as well.
Well, it's a trust thing. I think he's got no trust in players beyond this starting 11, or very few. Van der Beek's a classic example of that. He's not somebody he trusts at all, and I don't think he thinks in a situation like that he's going to make a difference. But he's not giving the guy a chance, ever. He's never had a successful sort of run in the team. And
Fred on. Huh? He brought Fred on when he was trying to chase the win.
And was it Tuanzebe at one point? I'm thinking, why are you bringing a defender on, man? What are you doing? Yeah, I think he just made unfathomably crazy decisions at weird times. And to be honest, as soon as we got to extra time, I think most United fans were kind of accepting he's going to play for penalties. And literally then it's out of your hands. It's literally who blinks first. And neither team blinked until it got to David De Gea, of all people. So crazy penalty shootout. I'm going to go to Dave now because I'm going to give him his chance to have his say. Where did Solskjaer go wrong, Dave? Keep it sort of short and sweet if you can. But what did he do that made the job impossible for United to win?
The lineup was wrong, straight away. It's odd that he's played with this double pivot of Fred and McTominay all season, especially in the big games, and then for some reason he decided to take one of them out and play a player that's not played well in months in Rashford on that left side. He's not fit, and everyone can see it as well. Yeah. He comes out then on social media after the game and obviously gives a statement. Obviously, he got racially abused on social media, which is obviously terrible. But he come out with a statement and he's basically admitted that he's had physical limitations over the last few months. So basically admitting he's injured. He's playing for injuries.
Yeah.
And we can all see he's not the player that he was before October, was it? I think when he had his last injury, and he's just not looked the same since. His movements, he's looked lazy, which is completely, doesn't sound like the Marcus Rashford that, we were watching tear it up. Last season before Bruno came, he was carrying that team, and he's just not been the same player. He's had terrible games, but had a killer pass in him or has provided a great cross. But his general all-round play has just been really poor. And we played like a team of 10 men in that game. Every time the ball came to him, moves broke down. We weren't recycling the ball. We weren't keeping the ball in the right moments. Decision-making was really terrible. And it just generally looked like we had no idea how to get through their defence. It was just impenetrable, really.
Yeah, well, it wasn't impenetrable. I think they were as frail as we made them look. We didn't really try and push the issue. The low block was always going to be...
How we were playing, it was impenetrable, sorry.
Yeah, the way we were playing was, but the way they were set up, I think they were still right for somebody to tip-tap their way through them with a few quick interchanges in the final third. We had nothing like that. We had no players capable of doing that. Rashford wasn't even at the races, was he, at all? And it's strange to think that we didn't have anybody who trusted to do that. I thought McTominay did really well on that note, though. I thought McTominay was one of the driving forces of the team. Yeah, he was really
on the pitch for United.
I think what Myles touched upon is Rashford. He doesn't suit those low block teams. He's not particularly brilliant in tight spaces. It pains me to say it, but I think Dan James would have been improved in that game.
I don't think so either.
I don't know. He's all pace, isn't he? He's not really.
That same
you're playing against one.
He's not great in the box. He needs space to attack, but nothing Rashford was trying was paying off, and it was just so frustrating. It's been a summary actually of the last few games of United season.
Definitely.
Where we played poorly. The odd game we've won, we played quite well against Wolves, and it was our second string. It wasn't entirely surprising. We spoke about it. We thought, they'll come through this against Villarreal. But this, as we've seen so many times, especially in the last couple of years, we've just struggled to break down defensive teams, and it's been our undoing again. I don't really need to mention anything because Myles has touched upon most points, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a bit like that City game in some ways because City didn't want to play Chelsea, but then we'd have been better off playing somebody like Arsenal in this respect, wouldn't we? I think we'd have actually had to go at Arsenal better than we would have done against Villarreal. You disagree?
I still think we'd have lost against them as well. Arsenal, we can't buy a win against Arsenal at the minute. It wouldn't have surprised me. The two underdogs have won both European finals.
Yeah.
So,
the only other things that I would have noticed were the first thing is you're going to look at that Villarreal selection and think they're playing Juan Foyth at right back. Now, he's not a good centre back, so put him out of position. That's an area to exploit. So your left winger is going to be really important. So to play an unfit player there is mad. When he has said, I'm not playing Fred because he picked up a knock in training, so he's not 100% fit. He was fit enough to make the bench. So Rashford was probably at the same sort of fitness level as Fred was. So that selection was very odd to me. And the other thing to pick up on was just how bad De Gea was in that penalty shootout. That was not a good penalty shootout. Everyone keeps talking about that was amazing because there was so many in it. Well, yeah, but he couldn't get his timing right for anything. He was too early for one, too late for the next. He could not work out when to move. And even Rulli, the Villarreal goalkeeper, should have saved 2 of them at least. Really, he was very poor.
Yeah, poor goalkeeping from both. But for De Gea, we knew that his penalty record was terrible. He hasn't saved a penalty since, was it 2014 or something like that? It's a long time.
Yeah. So he saved one recently, and then I think it had to be retaken because he was off his line.
Yeah, oh god, yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it was the one against West Brom early in the season when Lindelof had that terrible handball decision. No, Crystal Palace.
It's all right.
I don't remember the opponent, but I remember the situation.
You signed Tom Heaton now, so you'll be fine. I'm a bit gutted. I like Tom Heaton.
Well, does that spell the end of David De Gea, though, Dave? That's my next question for you. Is this his farewell? And if so, what a rubbish way to go.
Is it going to get any rosier with United anytime soon? I know that's a really drastic thing to say, but
well, what do they need then? What do they need from you? What do you reckon?
The thing is, they've backed Solskjaer these last 3 years now. He's been in charge. We've won nothing. We've lost how many? 4 semi-finals is it, and 1 final now? Yeah. And people are saying, there's similarities there because Klopp lost how many of the finals it was with Liverpool, and he lost this many. So you can't make that comparison. One's an absolute renowned world-class manager. The other one has come straight from Mulder and relegating Cardiff. I
don't know why that's still funny, but it is.
Do you know what? It's crazy to think, but if Mourinho was managing that final, tell you what, we probably wouldn't have played great football, but he would have won that game because his man management and he knows how to win games. He knows when to make the subs. He knows when to make changes. He knows when we're under the clock and we look like we're conceding. He makes those changes in games, whether it's at half time or not. He does it. And Solskjaer, it just seems like as though he just kind of like waits to see if the storm will be weathered. We'll see if we can get through this. And sometimes,
like Myles said, though, it's like he thinks because it's Manchester United, we'll get through in the end. But it's not enough to just believe it. You've got to actually do it.
You worry as well about how much movement there is in the managerial market right now and how many opportunities Man United are missing out on. And I love Solskjaer. He seems like a lovely bloke, but he's there very much for sentimental value. He's done all right at times this season and pulled a few things out of the bag, but no one still could look at him and go, yeah, he's a top-class manager. But they're out there, top-class managers. So you look at how a squad adds depth and improves on players that are already getting them success on the pitch. Why aren't Man United doing that with their manager? You look, Chelsea have brought Tuchel in. You'd take Tuchel over Solskjaer, wouldn't you? And you'd think that Tuchel would take Man United over Chelsea because it's Man United. Regardless of what's going on with them still, they will attract an amazing manager if the club go for it. That's why they got Van Halen. That's why they got Mourinho in still. It doesn't matter where United are, they're United. And particularly almost the worse it goes for them, the more likely someone is to go, I'll be the one to be the new Ferguson. I'll be the one to turn around and make them successful because the infrastructure is there to many people. But United are going to keep missing out on people and let other teams get ahead of them by getting the right manager in. There are good players in that squad that if they were managed properly, Van der Beek is not all of a sudden a bad footballer. He's a very good player. Amad Diallo, where was he? I'd have brought him on. He would have been more effective than Rashford in that game. Martial can be a better player than he's been under Solskjaer this season. The defence, Lindelof looks awful all of a sudden, and he's not a bad defender on his day.
All of a sudden, Myles, it's not all of a sudden at all.
But I feel like that's poor management. I feel like if you had he wouldn't be this bad under Tuchel. He wouldn't, because look at how much Rudiger has come on in that time. Zuma, Christensen, even Thiago Silva settled way quicker under him.
It would be as bad because he's a very limited defender, and he's never been good enough. And I think Rudiger has always had it to improve to that level. And we just haven't got very good centre-backs. That's literally it. I don't think Eric Bailly is going to get any better.
What you can say about United is I think that this season they've conceded the second most goals from set pieces
Mm.
behind, with 14 goals. I think
That's mad.
Yeah. So that and you know, that's got to come down to coaching. Why is it? That's nearly 1 in 2 games we've conceded from a set piece. Why do we continue to concede these goals? We've got Harry Maguire at centre back, one of them. You know, it's just.
They were moaning at Lindelof for the goal, but it's Luke Shaw that loses his runner. But why Luke Shaw is on their striker in the first place is bizarre to me. Why you aren't putting one of your centre backs on him as a big threat was odd. But Lindelof got the flack for it. But it was awful marking.
It was a mixture. I mean, even David De Gea wasn't commanding his area. He was
he never does,
like everybody else, and he needed to watch his line and go, guys, watch the fella who's running in behind, and nobody did.
But that's defensive organisation that should be coming from a coach, or
it should, But the goalkeeper's
leader on the pitch. He didn't have it. There was no. Who was
about the subs? Is how many of them players on that bench will be feeling so, you know, down in the dumps that they feel, you know, Solskjaer feels like they're not good enough to make an impact on that game. You know, it takes until the 100th minute. Is that got to be a record? It must be a record.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the 100th minute to make us your first sub, like, and it was evident from the very beginning of extra time at Villarreal that the more likely team to win it in open play.
Yeah, I know. I think what we'll do though is probably get Sancho in the summer, and I think that will make a huge difference down that right hand side, because he is the kind of player that will take a game like this and pick apart a defence. And with Bruno Fernandes near him, with Edison Cavani near him, I think there's a quality at that final third to actually play through a low block quite effectively. But there's no players really at the minute on the wide areas to make that happen. I think Sancho is definitely the one who would unlock that for me.
Yeah. Would you change Solskjaer this summer? And if so, who for?
I would, yeah. I'd go back in for Pochettino because I don't think he's happy at PSG. I think he should have been the choice all along. And I think, again, he'd jump at a chance of managing Manchester United. It's not going to happen. Weirdly, there's a chunk of the fan base, probably most of them, that won't want Solskjaer out. And I think it is mostly down to sentiment. I really do, because he's such a lovely guy. I think they want him to go on his terms, but that's not going to happen either. So will it happen? No. I think Solskjaer's here for another maybe half season. I can't see us having a very good start. I think this has really rocked our momentum massively. The last few games it's been coming. We've not played brilliantly for a while.
And a contract extension, you know, if that's the case, then, you know, but surely you've got to watch that final and think, should we just hang tight for this season? This is his last year of his contract. I think they've just got to see how this season plays out and see how we do progress. Forget the players that he wants in the season. Great, you know, let's see how we perform and just at the end of the year.
United.
I don't think he knows what kind of players he wants or needs. I think that's out of his kind of remit. I really do. I don't think he's got that kind of scouting knowledge or ability to know, okay, I need this kind of player in this kind of position, which is why a director of football is even more important.
Yeah, I agree with that. United seem to be the only club that are hanging on to that sentiment as well. You look at Chelsea had Lampard in, club legend, and he did a pretty good job in his first season, given the circumstances. It wasn't working. They highlighted it. They've just won the Champions League because they weren't afraid to be ruthless. Juventus brought Pirlo in. He didn't achieve what they needed him to. Got him in the Champions League, but didn't achieve what they wanted him to. So he's gone. So why are United still going, oh no, but Ollie's nice, isn't he? He's a good guy. Because he says whatever the club want him to. That's the problem. It's an easy ride for him. I think a lot has been disguised by finishing second this season. How many games they came from behind in and won because of the class of someone like Fernandes pulling teams apart. It's not Solskjaer. Otherwise, he would have set them up right in the first place. And I can't help but think that there are so many managers moving around, which we've kind of talked about, that you would snap up at United straight away.
On that note then, Myles, who would you say would be a good fit for United of those sort of available or that have been recently available at the minute? Because obviously Conte is a big one.
Yeah.
Would he fit? But Allegri was available until Juventus snapped him back up. Would he have worked? You know, who would you say would fit that role pretty well?
There are a few that you could look at right now. I think you're right when you talk about Pochettino. Obviously, there are players there that Pochettino could definitely help develop. However, he's only ever won one trophy. So if you're talking about Solskjaer failing at semi-finals and finals, you maybe want someone who's a bit more of a proven winner. And in that, Zidane is now available. Zidane is clearly more tactically aware than Solskjaer. He's a big name as well. he has won finals. At times where Real Madrid, they might have had Ronaldo and had some big players and stuff, but he's still been there to get them through it. United were the better team in that final on paper. So the right manager makes them realise that. It would be very easy for someone like Cristiano Ronaldo to be complacent. Zidane got the best out of them, knew when to rotate him in the squad and when to use him. He is the best option right now that's available to me. But you're right. I don't think I would take Conte purely because he's a bit of a firecracker and he will demand certain things from the board that the fans would love him for, but he ain't going to get them. That seems like a recipe for disaster to me. That's why he's left Inter already. The talk is he's left Inter because they really need to get some money in the summer and they want to sell Lukaku. And he thinks of Lukaku like his son all of a sudden. So he was like, well, I'm going then. I don't think Conte would work. Allegri might have, but for me, I think I'd snap Zidane up while I could. I thought Zidane would end up at Juve, but as he's not, that's where I would go for.
I'll be honest, I didn't even consider Zidane in the conversation because I got the vibe from him that he wanted to take some time out of football. Like the time at Madrid in his second spell had just drained him completely because he seemed like a broken man, I think, towards the end. Some of the quotes that he had about his time at Madrid this time around were quite sad to read, really.
Yeah.
But Dave, who would you take at United at the minute as manager? If you were going to replace Solskjaer with anyone who's available, who would you pick?
I think what Myles touched upon then, Zidane is he knows how to win games. You know, it's easy to say obviously the players that he had at Real Madrid, but it's it's more than just having the names on the team sheet. He's someone you're going to look up to. If you look at the players in that team at United, you talk the amount of times that Pogba's mentioned about playing for Zinedine Zidane as well. There's a player, if there's a manager that can get Pogba to play out of his skin, surely it's got to be. If he can't play well for that man, then
you've sold it to me. I think if I could see United ruthlessly replace Solskjaer with Zidane this summer, what kind of statement that would send out about the ambition of the club would say a lot. And
I'd love to see him against Pep as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see him in the Premier League. I'd love to see him with a group of young players who need improving. I'd love to see him with a transfer kitty because I don't think he's going to get that at Real Madrid, or he knew he wouldn't have got what he needed. So yeah, so many things that I think he could just embrace and make the club a power again.
There's so many young players now, and you talk about the likes of like Marcus Rashford, Anthony Martial, there's Mason Greenwood. We've lacked a proper coach in these last 2 years. The last real brilliant coach, you could argue, probably Van Gaal, and Rooney spoke about his method and how the details that he picked up, in particular in training, in matches, he was able to improve players, and we've just not had that in a number of years now. We've got players who are in their very important years in their career. Rashford's is still 23? Is he 22? Martial's 24, 25. How much could he improve some of these players? With his methods, and that's the frustrating thing is the board that just aren't getting appointments right with these managerial appointments. And I think as fans, that's probably, the most frustrating thing is recruitment's just been all over the place. So
that's the most obvious thing, isn't it, as well? You've gone from one manager to another like this, and they're all completely different to the last one that was there. So you build a squad for one manager, you have Mourinho's squad there all of a sudden, and then get rid of him and bring Solskjaer in. It couldn't be any more different. But your players are still set up that way, and it takes time to invest to get the right structure in. They started to do that with people like Bruno, but is Bruno a Solskjaer player or just a very good player that would adapt to any kind of manager? I definitely think it's the latter of those two. So there isn't a strategy there, and that's where that director of football is clearly missing. They haven't got a recruitment plan, it seems. They're bringing in people based on opportunity. That's why Van der Beek's there. That's why Tellez is there. Tellez is a great player, and Shaw has had a better season because of the competition. But was that the investment United needed in the summer to bring in another left back or another number 10? No, of course it wasn't. They're the only two players you spent money on. Two players that you didn't need, really. And actually, the people that were already there have been your best players this season. So there's no plan. But just quickly, I know obviously you two are Man United fans. We're in England, but we've talked so much about this final without actually saying fair play Villarreal as well. They got their job right. They did exactly what they needed to do. Emery got it spot on. He knew what United were capable of, so just set up in a way to nullify that, and they played out of their skin, a lot of them. And you look at someone like Pau Torres, who's actually now being linked with Man United. He's from the town. There's 50,000 people, they kept saying, in that town. And all right, that's not the pool they're picking from, but that still says a lot about the development of a club, that they've gone on to win that trophy at a time where Man United couldn't. And for him in particular, he had a great game and could now go on to have an even bigger career because of it. They finished 7th in La Liga, but they managed to really pull it out when it mattered. And that was because they had a good coach. Emery did.
Well, they're playing Champions League football now as well next season. So the achievement and the incentive for them is arguably greater, I think. And they sensed an opportunity and took it. So, yeah, massive congratulations to Villarreal and to Emery, because he's a nice guy. I think he took a really load of unnecessary flack for the way he spoke and things like that at Arsenal, when actually, as a coach, he's pretty good.
That's a good point. Even that night, BT, they're so patronising, some of the pundits. One of them said, oh, yeah, well, Emery went to PSG and then went to Arsenal. He's back in Spain now, so he can actually communicate with the players. That's why it's going well for him. That whammy right up. So patronising.
That's quite an amateur comment to make.
Ridiculous thing to say. I can't remember who said it. It might have been Hargreaves, but I just thought it was stupid.
Congratulations to Villa, anyway. Yeah, they did well. I think they deserved it on the balance of the final, definitely. They didn't actually threaten an awful lot, but that's the way it goes. They played the game pretty well. They managed the game, managed United's threat, whatever threat they actually had, pretty easily. So congratulations to them. Congratulations to Chelsea as well. Deserved winners on the night. And a final congratulations as well before we go, just to Brentford on sealing promotion to the Premier League. So quick thoughts on them. Did you see much of the final? I've seen bits of them this season. I'll be honest, not that much. But all the talk has been about how they're quite a progressive, quite attacking team who could actually do really well in the Premier League. What's your thoughts on them, Myles?
I'm a bit gutted that they're promoted, to be honest, because for the last couple of years, Villa have managed to cherry pick the best things of Brentford and take them on. They might find it a bit more difficult to do that now. No, fair play to them. They've got an incredible model. They managed to rejuvenate that side and keep going and keep going. And this season, they finally managed to get it over the line. They lost Watkins. They lost Ben Rama last summer. They brought in Ivan Toney, who he's had a spell at a Premier League club, and it didn't quite work out. And now look where he is. He was absolutely fantastic this season. And again, had the moment in the final to get the penalty at least. And it's a difficult moment in a final, and he took it. So fair play to him. They play good football, very attractive football. Like I say, they managed to shape a very good scouting network, and a lot of players are coming through there and doing really, really well. So it will be exciting to see them in the Premier League, as long as they don't. They've got to find that balance, haven't they? Because some teams that play like that kind of attractive football in the Championship come up and try to do it again and just get overrun and lose. Or some teams that do that come up and go, we can't do that anymore. Let's just defend all the time. And that doesn't work because that's not what they're capable of. And then you get teams like Leeds or Wolves. So we'll see what Brentford will be. I hope that they can do a good job, because they seem like they've got a really good model and they're really on it when it comes to bringing players forward. So we'll see. I'd still like Villa to maybe look at Ivan Toney, though.
Yeah, I think they I mean, you say that they've got a style that you think could potentially get them relegated back again, because it might not. They might backfire, but that happened to Norwich as well. They played similar football 2 seasons ago, went back down again to the Championship, but have come straight back up with the same style, essentially, and most of the same team. So it could work. And there might be a case where they go down and come back up again, but they've been trying to get in the Premier League for a few seasons now, come very close. So to see them there is going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how they adapt. Dave, have you seen much of Brentford this season? And if so, how do you think they'll manage in the Premier League in the coming season? Do you think they're better than some of the teams that are already there?
I think they've got a really good setup in their team. I think their scouting setup is actually renowned for being like really, really brilliant. But they've obviously got some good players in there, and Bruno and Tony being 2 of the main players, I think, will probably actually play, I think, in their first team. I think obviously there's some additions that they need to make, I feel, in some positions, but I feel as though they've got a good setup, and I feel like it wouldn't surprise me if they stayed up next season. They're a good counter-attacking team as well. So if they can get some experienced players defensively, which is I felt as though Norwich probably needed that. They were a very young team. If they can get that, then they've got every chance of staying up. Ivan Toney is a really good player as well. I feel like he'll score goals. He's got the physicality for the league. He can score headers. So we scored plenty of goals against United. So
here he goes again.
Well, do you know what, guys? That draws an end to the club football season, and it's been a bloody weird one, hasn't it? Crazy, isn't it? So the next time we talk, it will be international related for a while. So how are you feeling about the internationals, guys? Pumped?
Well, squad gets announced tomorrow, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, I can't wait.
That's true, yeah. And then we've got a couple of friendlies, haven't we, prior to the tournament actually starting, so we can see what kind of setup he's going to play, Gareth Southgate, from the off. But yeah, exciting times ahead. And the next time we talk, it would be all England. So, well, not just England, it'd be any team that we can see from international football, because it's going to be a feast of football for the Euros, and I can't wait to start dissecting it, to be fair. So,
are we going to set up a football diary Euro Fantasy Football League? I've got my team done already.
So, yeah, I think that it'd be rude not to, really, wouldn't it? So,
good done.
Let's do that. Until next week, though, guys, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and difficult to talk about United's sluggish end to the season, but you know what? We had to put it to bed. It was something we had to do, and we've done that now. So, yeah, thanks, guys. And it's been a quality club season that we've ended on, a weird one, but it's done. Internationals roll on the Euros, and we'll talk about that next week. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.
See you later.